before I hand over to the chair. Only speak when invited to by the chair. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand and direct all communications via the chair. For those joining remotely, please ensure that your mics are muted when you're not speaking. If you're having any technical difficulties, please use the chat function in Google Meet to alert the meeting or dial using the information provided. I'll hand over to the chair.
Thank you, Rabia. Welcome everybody to this meeting of the Corporate Committee on the 14th of March 2023. I'd like to confirm who is in attendance first. So starting off with, well, I should start off with me. So I'm Councillor Claire Potter and I'm chair of this committee. So I'll first of all go to the vice chair. So we've got Councillor Young. Would you like to say hello, Councillor Young? And then going to my far left, we've got Councillor Binny Lubbock.
Hello.
Councillor Sadek. Councillor Maxwell.
Hello.
Councillor Desmond.
Hello.
Councillor Webb.
Hello.
Councillor Turbo Deloff.
Hello.
Councillor, and then it's just Councillor Narcross left, I think.
Hello.
And we've also got Jerry McCarthy present, the officer, senior officer present, who is head of community safety.
Hello.
And online, we've got Josephine Sterakidis from our legal team. We've got Councillor Claire Joseph. We've got Councillor Midnight Ross. We've got Councillor Jan Ozum.
Hello.
Apologies. Councillor Fliss Premru.
Hello.
And we've got Mario, our IT expert. Okay, thank you, everybody. Okay, so moving on to the agenda. Have we had any apologies for absence? If I'm correct, we've had Councillors Lodo, Scott and Councillor Race. Any other apologies? Okay. Item 2, declarations of interest of members. Got any declaration to declare? No. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Can we agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of December 2022 for those that are present, were present for that meeting? Great.
Great.
If I can just add, there will be a response from planning next week in relation to the query on flagged parks. And there was another action as well, wasn't there, which was, no, it was from HR. Sorry, in terms of the comparison with like-minded boroughs and CEOs pay, Rabia will chase that up. So hopefully we'll have a response for the June meeting. Thank you, Rabia. Okay, so moving on to our first substantive item, the annual report of the Public Space Protection Order. Can I invite Jerry McCarthy to introduce the report? You have 10 minutes maximum to just give us an outline and also to highlight any important points.
Thank you, Chair. There have been controls on alcohol in place since 2010, when we had a designated public place order in place, and that kept on being amended or changed with the introduction of the Antisocial Behaviour Act in 2014. And the last amendment to this change was on the 18th of October 2021, when Cabinet approved the making of a public space protection order, which places control on alcohol-related antisocial behaviour. And the order was made under Section 59 of the Antisocial Behaviour Crime Policing Act 2014. Everyone knows, historically, alcohol-related ASB was regulated by the DPPO with the 2010 order. That then changed with the introduction of the 2014 Act. And obviously, public spaces protection orders were put in place under that Act. And they're intended to deal with a particular nuisance or problem in a specific area that's detrimental to the local community's quality of life. by imposing conditions on the use of that area which apply to everyone. And they're intended to help to ensure that the law-abiding majority can use and enjoy public spaces free from ASB. That's the intention of Public Space Protection Order. It's not harming people's normal enjoyment of the use of a public space, i.e. a park in the main, which is where a lot of ASB occurs. In relation to this, ASB and orders associated with a section of people present in our streets and estates is a complex issue. It requires better integration of partnership activities, create a flexible response to ensure that, and also the main thing is to provide support to people who need it as well. Just wanted to reiterate that. And as I said earlier on, the focus of the DPPO/PSPO is to moderate behaviour once considered to have achieved since its introduction and its continued maintenance. And as I say, enforcement is not our first option in relation to enforcing this. We engage with people who we see on the street where alcohol problems are identified. One of the things which isn't in the report which we have is we have a street population officer within service, and their main role is to deal with people they see in the street that are referred to her, and then she makes appropriate referrals to Greenhouse, Turning Point, etc. So people receive the support and advice and assistance that they need. And it's a common myth that a lot of people on the street with alcohol issues are actually homeless. They're not. A lot of people actually have accommodation. So I just need you to think about that as well. It's not just assuming that people on the street are automatically homeless. They're not. So I just want to refer to that as well. And on page 20 of the report under the executive summary, I just referred to sort of it has happened through COVID, whatever, that the visible street population appears to have increased in the last 3 years. But our sort of activities don't support that. And there is a table under paragraph 4.13.2 which shows breakdown by ward of our of police activity in relation to alcohol ASB, and it is very low for 2022. So, and also on the page 21, there's a breakdown of antisocial behaviour warnings issued by our enforcement officers. And obviously, you will see that in some wards, no antisocial behaviour warnings were issued. So that's why, in case you're concerned, if you're from a particular ward and your ward isn't on the table, that means no antisocial behaviour warnings were issued in that ward. And our enforcement officers work with the police. And obviously, first thing we do is issue an antisocial behaviour warning. If the behaviour doesn't change, then we can issue a fixed penalty notice to ensure compliance with the PSPO. And in another power that is available to us, which we rarely use, are injunctions. And they were brought in under the 2014 Act. So there's lots of tools we can use. But as I reiterated earlier on, the PSPO is there to target specifically problem behaviour as having a detrimental effect on the community's quality and enjoyment. And it's not there to stop people enjoying themselves socially, such as a group of people out in the street. That's not the intention at all. I just want to reiterate that as well. The council, as I said, with the introduction of the 2014 Act, the council has a number of tools we utilise, and we do that. And obviously, enforcement is the last option. And I have to say, I'm not aware that we have ever issued an FPN on the PSPO. It's there to be used. It's one of the many tools we use in dealing with issues as they arise. And obviously, our first thing is to speak to people, find out what is actually causing a problem, if there is a problem. And I know culturally people do socialise on the street, and you've got to be aware of that. So it doesn't actually mean that they're causing a problem if they are out on the street. And people just make that assumption that there are, and I'll say there one secondly, you can't just assume that if they're out on the street, they're homeless, not necessarily. So that's that. But as I said, we have our street population coordinator, I've mentioned she's doing excellent work on that. What we also have on a monthly basis is the street users outreach meeting, where council officers, the police and outreach staff, they discuss individual cases, they're all prioritised. And obviously, the intention of that is to reduce any alcohol-related ASB And obviously we work closely as well as say with Thames Reach, Turning Point, those organisations as well. And one of the things our enforcement officers do in their regular patrols is to identify sort of emerging and actual hotspots, so that officers are tasked where there is an issue. One of the things that is looked at as well on our monthly partnership tasking meetings, so any hotspots are looked at and discussed. And obviously, the other thing as well as cases, as well as going to Zoom, we can look at them through the various antisocial behaviour action panel meetings, and there are 4 of those a month, so that actually happens on a regular basis as well. One of the things which we may be concerned about is have we undertaken the equality impact assessment in relation to the implementation of this? And the answer is yes. And on page 22 under paragraph 4.14, you see that was undertaken to ensure compliance with section 149 of the Equality Act. And obviously we comply with that as well. PSPO was approved by Cabinet, which again, we went through all the consultation procedure in advance of that, so that was done correctly. And obviously in relation to this report, there wasn't any consultation. It wasn't required because it's for informative purposes, but obviously there is guidance on undertaking consultation and that, and obviously the council is a very good consultation team which undertake this work on our behalf and with us. And we did undertake consultation prior to the PSPO being implemented. And that's all I want to say at the moment, unless councillors have any questions.
Thank you, Jerry. It was really good to hear about the history of the DPPO and the PSPO, and also the moderate approach you take in terms of only using this as a last resort. Okay, over to members. Any questions? So I think I saw Councillor Desmond's hand first, then it's Councillor Maxwell, Councillor Billy Lubbock. We'll be taking 3s and then it'll be the next 3. Okay, so Councillor Desmond, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I think that there has been an improvement. There were 2 particular pinch points in historic terms that it was evident there was severe problems. One was in Gillette Square in Dalston, and the other was around the circular toilets in Stamford Hill. I've not for this reason, but I've been past both locations recently on a couple of occasions, and the problem does seem to have diminished. But I'm particularly keen that we should have a sensitive approach, because many of the people who are drinking are quite vulnerable. Many of them are people who have issues with homelessness, as you say. So are there any targeted arrangements so that where there are specific locations where people can feel intimidated, we can perhaps, on a quasi-social service basis, look into the issues and see if there are sensible solutions to deal with them?
That's the next 2 questions. Yeah, okay with that. Okay.
Thanks. I mean, I agree. I'm pleased there is a sort of a sensitive approach. I suppose I've got a couple of things I was interested in, because people with substance abuse and alcohol addictions, they won't just stop because of an order. So I suppose, do we know if some of them are just been moving on somewhere else to do it? And also, have we got some more information about whether, how many of them access support, you know, the ones you mentioned like Turning Point and our various services? Because I suppose I'd be interested to see what work has been done to help people come off alcohol, because, or drugs as well, because as Councillor Desmond said, it's often very vulnerable groups. Yes, they may not be homeless, but they could be vulnerable to homelessness and all sorts of other issues. Thanks.
Thank you for that report. It's really good to see, and I'm glad to see that FPNs and injunctions aren't regularly used. That's great. I was just wondering, equalities impact assessment was mentioned, and you said it obviously all applies with the equalities law. I'm just wondering what the kind of outcome was from the equalities impact assessment, and if demographic data is monitored within the enforcement of this. Thank you.
Gary, if you could try and answer those in order, if that's possible.
If I start at the end, but of course, the equality impact assessment undertaken for the PSPO will be still on the council's website under the cabinet papers, so it's accessible from that. I can't tell you exactly what we did at the time, but we would have looked at all the any groups of protected characteristic in actually putting the equality impact assessment together. But it will be still on the website and you can still access it. And then if you have any further questions, come back to me.
And just, is demographic data being monitored as part of the process?
It probably is. I don't attend, say, for the sewer meeting, for example, that demographic data would be picked up in that. I can ask our street population coordinator if she can provide some information on that, which same thing will apply to Councillor Maxwell's question about numbers of referrals to Turning Point, what the outcomes are. That's the sort of information I'm.
Yes, I mean, it's great that has just ways for managing to get support.
If you can remember to turn on your mic when you're speaking, but I think you were quite clear, Councillor.
I think our main priority is to try and find them support, and if they're homeless, then try to get them into accommodation. But I can ask our officers, see if we can give me I can find out how many numbers of how many people are on the sewer meeting every month, and then sort of how many people we might have dealt with in the last year, and sort of what the outcome for them was, whether they've been put into housing, whether they're still homeless or whatever the situation is. I can get some data on that. Yes, we're working close with the greenhouse and obviously Turning Point to Public Health. We do a lot of joint work together, and I'm sure you'll have seen the bus out on Town Hall Park, the Colgate bus, where we've had that in Gillette Square as well, where we've obviously helped giving people haircuts, that had their teeth looked at, all this sort of thing, you know, help that they wouldn't necessarily get, because if you're not registered with a GP, you can't get X, Y, and Z. Likewise, registering with a dentist, as everyone knows, you can be waiting a long time on a waiting list to register with a dentist. So that support is there as well. So we offer very good support, but it's not enforcement led. It's all about assisting people, trying to get people to get out of the situation they're in. And as you say, it's not easy. And in relation to Councillor Desmond's question, I would say that, yes, those two areas are less of a problem. I think Gillette Square will always be a problem because of the access to it. It's not closed off in any way. There are at least 5 or 6 access points into Gillette Square, so it will always be problematic. But I'm sure you'll be aware that pods have all been upgraded recently and replaced. I think there's a launch of it on Friday. It's being reopened by the Mayor, by HCD, so hopefully that will improve the situation as well. And we have additional enforcement officers out in Dalston at night, sort of between Thursday and Sunday, just to deal with sort of all the ongoing issues. We have a Dalston project, and I can provide you with some statistics on that and what the officers have done and how many people they've engaged with and what they've done in terms of expelling notices, etc., say in the last year, if that would help. It's probably best if I send it to Rabia and then she can copy everyone under.
So that's an action. You're going to send some information. Great. And then I think it's Councillor Turbo Deloff, Councillor Sadek. Have you still got questions to answer? And I noticed Councillor Premru wants to ask a question online, and possibly Councillor Joseph, unless their question's been answered. Okay, over to Councillor Turbo Deloff.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks very much for the report. It is, although it sounds great, I do have a bit of curiosity as to the decline. I mean, it's great news, but I wonder if something has also changed in registering ASBs as that has led to this big decline. My question is related to repeated ASBs. If there is any report on that or data and what happened, I'm particularly interested in knowing if there is repeated antisocial behavior and what sort of support there is available for when that happens, particularly mental health, if there is any. Thank you.
Councillor Sadek.
Thanks for the report. Couple of quick questions, hopefully. One is just on the table at 4.13.2. My ward, Kings Park, isn't reflected in that, and it does seem to include wards with a nil return. So I just wondered if that data could be added. I'd be interested to know what the stats are for Kings Park. And then on the tables, on the next page, on page 21, to do with the warnings, Kings Park isn't there again, but you did mention that where there isn't return, you know, where the second table where there's been no incident, it wouldn't feature. There's an incident that I can think of last year that was in the ward that was drink-related antisocial behaviour that isn't obviously featured there, and presumably that's because there was no warning issued against it, and that's making me think or question the process that you have to go to in order to reach the point of issuing a warning, and perhaps circumstances where you're not able to identify an individual or individuals that are involved in antisocial behaviour involving drink. In this case, it was a sort of late night rave on one of the residential streets. Whether this is a sort of perfect measure of drink related antisocial behaviour, or whether there are circumstances which aren't really captured through this process.
Thank you.
Do you want to do those two, and then I'll come to Councillor Premier and Councillor Young.
I think in relation to your second question about it not being picked up, it probably would have been picked up as a noise nuisance case if there was a rave rather than sort of ASB caused by alcohol or whatever. That way it would pick up, wouldn't necessarily be reflected in this. We may have dealt it as noise nuisance, and then officers wouldn't necessarily have thought about dealing with it as an ASB such behaviour warning being issued for us.
And is that so? It definitely was a noise issue, but there were also instances of there was stuff that wasn't noise related that residents had complained about with regards to things that had been left in their front gardens and various things that I don't need to mention, but that weren't noise related. So I just wondered whether that changes your answer at all.
Unless we were able to identify the people responsible, then we wouldn't be issuing an ASB warning. But again, if it's not reported to us or to police, we wouldn't necessarily know about it. And I keep saying this every meeting I go to about things. If any issues that residents have that aren't reported either to us or to police, then if it's not reported and logged, it didn't happen. It's as simple as that, I'm afraid. I know people say anecdotally, then the councillors always say this, that residents tell us this, but if residents don't report it, we don't know about it and we can't take action, because anything we do, regardless of what it is, I know I'm digressing now, but anything we do is intelligence led. So unless we know that there have been 3, 4, 5, 6 reports about something, then as far as we're concerned, we don't know about it. It's not on our radar. And in relation to your question, councillor, I can't answer about mental health because I don't work in adult services, but I'm sure, Rabia, you might be able to make a request to somebody on the elders.
So the questions about kind of support for those that are repeatedly carrying out ASB. So yeah, and let's get that information. I do note from that table on page 20, there's actually three wards missing. It's only 18 listed. I haven't worked out, aside from Kings Park, which ones they are. Can we have a complete table?
If your ward is mentioned, there were no instances.
Okay, it's
So
just
not
that you've
every
got
ward.
zeros for others, but you haven't got all of them down there.
Yeah, I see what you're getting at. That's police data we've extracted, so
Yeah.
That's not our data, that's police data.
Okay.
So it all depends how they're recorded, so we're reliant on, whereas our own information is, we know that.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. Okay, so I'm going to go online first before I come back to Councillor Young. So Councillor Premru, then Councillor Joseph. Over to Councillor Premru.
Thanks very much, Chair, and apologies for my voice. Thanks very much. And it is obviously a sensitive issue which needs a really joined up approach, especially where there is alcohol and substance abuse. I noticed there are a couple of entries for Clissold Ward, and we have had repeated complaints from some residents around Albion Parade, where there's a small park and it's quite a big drinking area with quite a lot of antisocial behaviour. I think it's sort of quietened down maybe with the cold weather and tends to step up obviously more as the weather improves into the summer. It's quite close to 2 primary schools. There have been complaints about a very, very multifarious complaints from residents about the behaviour and the fact that they'll be served alcohol in the local off licences, but of course anybody can get alcohol from anywhere, so you're not be able to kind of police that. I suppose one of my questions is, you said that obviously if things hadn't been reported they wouldn't appear. Quite often residents are adamant that they have, but maybe we need to look at that again. And can we also invite you to a ward forum, maybe to have a look at and sort of get them to have a bit of the residents have a bit of understanding about the difficulties and how we need to support those people as well.
Jerry, would you like to take that one first?
I think one of our officers would happy to attend a ward forum. We attend ward panels regularly and ward forums when requested, so I don't think that's an issue.
Okay, so Councillor Premroe, I'll leave you to take directly with Jerry. Yeah?
Thank you very much.
Okay, over to Councillor Joseph.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much, Jerry, for the report. I would also join with colleagues in requesting some data on the long-term outcomes for the people that have been subject to enforcement. I think that would be very interesting for us to learn. But my question was actually about how you guys respond. It seems to be quite reactive. So as you were saying, it's intelligence-led. And I just wondered if you had any capacity for a kind of more patrol-orientated way of doing things, because I'm just thinking that I suppose the concern is always that, you know, certain people in the population are kind of disproportionately sort of enforced in a way, whereas sort of more affluent drinkers, say in the parks in the summer, just become more of an accepted part of our kind of social scene, but they are in some ways equally disruptive. So I was just wondering if there was any, you know, capacity for your officers to patrol in a, you know, and to see what they come across, as opposed to relying on the public to sort of inform you, if you know what I mean. Because yeah, there are drinkers certainly in some of our parks which have you know, been quite disruptive, but sometimes you feel, well, perhaps because of their affluence they're not necessarily being responded to in the same way. So just interested in your views on that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor. Officers patrol the borough every day and night, not every night, but 4 and 5 nights a week they're out. And if they come across somebody who, for example, is homeless and they may think have a substance issue, they will automatically make a referral to Turning Point there and then, without it actually being logged or referred to anyone. It's put on our system so we know about them. And obviously, if they're, and we patrol parks on a regular basis over the summer months as well, and they deal with drinking in the parks as well, so that happens. So we're not always reliant on people. When I say it's intelligence-led, it could be from patrols enforcement officers could have undertaken, and it could also be from residents logging issues with the council. So it's not just, we're not just reliant on residents to do that. We are proactive in officers' patrols, and when they see things, if, for example, they're going out to deal with a dog fouling issue somewhere in the borough, but they see something else on the way, they will stop and address that while they're out and about. So they're not just blinkered on what they're going out to do. If they see something else that's important, they will actually deal with it. And I'll give you a very good example. But officers happened to be going out in Homerton Ward last week, and they saw something on their way which gave them concern. So they knocked on the door, but they didn't get anywhere. But they came back half an hour later, and they actually discovered there was obviously a huge safeguarding issue with an elderly resident. They automatically contacted Adult Safeguarding. So officers do that already, Councillor Jones. It's not just that we're waiting for people to do this. They are actually proactive, and if they're unsure about an issue, they will radio back to the officer team lead and say, "What do we do in this case?" So we're already doing that.
Thank you, Jerry. I think you heard that, Councillor Joseph. I know you dropped out briefly, but I think you got the gist. Yeah, great. Thumbs up. Okay, over to Councillor Young, and then we've got another question, Councillor Billy Lovick.
Thank you for that. Very aware that officers are proactive and that there are particular sort of hotspots that officers do patrol. I'm really interested in how this report fits in with the wider picture on antisocial behaviour in the borough. And I'm kind of have in my mind a couple of examples. One is at Manor House, where I know officers are patrolling and I know they are dealing with alcohol and drug related ASB. And there's quite a lot of work has gone on, but it doesn't appear anywhere here. Now, that may be because it's fabulously successful and therefore it's all gone. I don't think that's the case. So it'd be interesting to know how this report, this kind of the very small numbers that we see here for the orders, fits in with what we're actually seeing as a wider picture that the team are aware of and are working on. The other bit that I'm interested in is I had a small kind of funny little bit of casework. Somebody who doesn't live in the borough, who'd been issued with a penalty notice for littering (urinating), and which was alcohol related. So I'm aware that there are other kinds of antisocial behaviour which we know are alcohol related. I think in this case it was in Hoxton. That again wouldn't show up here. So it's not that the team aren't aware. It's not that the team haven't taken action, but it's just that we can't quite get the full picture when we're just looking at this one narrow bit. So I just wondered if there is a wider report that you produce at some other time that gives us that wider picture.
That's a report that normally goes to June committees, the annual enforcement report, so that would be covered in that.
Yeah, we will get further.
And would that include sort of where so if I'm thinking about Manor House, for example, I'm sure there are other examples, would that include that kind of interactive work that you're doing with the police? So they may have issued a notice, but we might not have, or we might have dealt with it without issuing a notice, or we might be doing other work.
Any work we do together with the police is recorded, so if the police serve a notice, our intelligence hub know about it, so it's all connected. As I said, everything we do is intelligence-led, because otherwise we wouldn't actually achieve anything without having any intelligence. And come back to the urination case, so that would be dealt by means of fixed penalty notice, so they'd get a fixed penalty notice on the Section 87 of the Environmental Protection Act. And I'm well aware of that case.
Yeah. And then the last follow-up
That's all right.
is the other thing I know you've done at Manor House, and I wonder if you've done it elsewhere, is to carry out other work which is not about issuing notices, but it's about trying to reorganise the area to make it less conducive to antisocial behaviour, whilst not putting people off from sitting, enjoying the space, and so on. Just wondered if that's also something that is reported on, so that we see this in a wider context.
That is likely to be covered in that report, so specifically wouldn't necessarily be mentioned, but we do a lot of negotiation with Street Scene to sort of get things changed around that. We've done work in the nighttime economy, say, for example, to get shortage, to get benches removed, that type of thing, to stop people sitting. Yes, and the council has a policy about having benches as well, so that elderly people are out about who can't walk very far need to sit down. But unfortunately, benches do attract ASB, whether you like it or not. And I have a view on benches that other people in the council don't have. So, and I fully understand how elderly people unable to walk certain distance need benches. But the problem is at night, but you can design benches so that people pull down seats rather than a sort of static thing that they sit on. When I go out in different places, I saw something in London Bridge and I saw all these seats, and I just said it was a magnet for ASB, because I wouldn't even agree to anything like that. And actually, it was just too many. Because if people have to do something to sit down, they won't do it. Whereas if there's a big space to sit down, they will do. I know you think that's probably crazy, but it's not. It's actually, that's how people operate. And especially if people are sitting waiting for a taxi or something, and then obviously if it's a busy area, then what they're likely to disturb people at night, they start shouting and talking very loudly if they've been out, so that can cause problems as well. But we have done that, and I know at Manor House we've done a lot of work, but we work with Street Scene to get that redone. But it doesn't happen overnight, as you know. It takes a lot of effort, because Street Scene have their ideas about what needs to be done. We have ours, and we need to come to a mutual agreement on that. And again, the other thing I would say, the Section 17 of the Crime and Disorder Act, services within the council have got a duty to liaise with community safety to prevent crime and disorder. And that's why we continue our services to make sure we're notified at an early stage rather than a late stage when something is designed and ready to be put in place.
Okay, thank you. And I think finally, I'm just checking, Councillor Vinnie Lubbock. Oh, and Councillor Norcross. And Councillor Turbo Dillon.
Yeah, just following up on something that Councillor Joseph said around groups that are kind of more enforced against than other groups. We know that the police have this gives the police more powers, and we know that the police have issues institutionally with racism. And I've just pulled up the Equalities Impact Assessment you've just pointed me towards, and it says in that the proposed PSPO is expected to have a neutral effect on this group race. And I'm just wondering how that can be, and if you are able to provide a bit more data about the demographics of who's being enforced against with this, or who's being issued warnings as well. Thank you.
We don't hold that information. Whether the police do or not, I don't know, but we haven't been able to extract that from the information that we got. But I can ask the intelligence officer if they can do some more digging to see if they can get more information on that. And one thing, we don't take any enforcement action against anyone under 18 years of age in relation to any of this. We don't even issue anyone under 18 with a fixed penalty notice. It's council policy. Just, I wanted to reassure you about that.
Okay, so where were we next? So, Councillor Norcross.
Sorry, you may have said this and I might have missed it, but obviously 4.133 shows the number of antisocial behaviour warnings. Obviously beyond that you can issue fixed penalty notices and injunctions ultimately. There's no stats for that, so is that because none of those have been issued?
No FPNs, no injunctions in relation to this. It's extreme measures to go for an injunction, which we would do. We would go down a route where we would give an antisocial behaviour warning. We may not even consider using the PSPO, what we might consider using it, the Antisocial Behaviour Act 2014. We give them a community protection warning, community protection notice, and there's a breach of the community protection notice, and they can go for an injunction. There is a long legal process to follow. The ultimate sanction is a criminal behaviour order, which we would do very, very rarely. But we follow it. We have a graduation enforcement approach. We've got a council enforcement policy, which we have to comply with. That was approved by Cabinet in 2019. So that is how we deal with things through graduation enforcement policy. So to do an injunction would be a very serious offence if that happened. And it would have to be going on an entrenched issue that wasn't able to be resolved through any other means.
Okay, so I think Councillor Turbo, you were alerting me to Councillor Ross on 9. Is that correct? Yes. Councillor Ross, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, thanks, Chair. And thank you for the report. First of all, I'd like to just add to what my colleagues have said, Councillor Joseph, about the demographic data, which would be really helpful so that we could just look at how, in practice, this is affecting people on the ground. I wanted to ask firstly about the change in classifications that the report states the police have done. Do you know what those changes are? So would you be able to share kind of what the incidents were classified before and what they are classified now? Or is that something again that you might say that's something only the police are aware of? But if you do have that information, that would be really helpful as well. And then I also just wanted to ask, I appreciate that FPNs and injunctions and even the warnings are quite rare, but I just wondered if I'm thinking about that, you know, there's different types of people which this may affect, but I'm sure there's a demographic in there which, say, imposing a fine upon would, well, I'm not sure if that would have a positive effect, and they may, say, have quite some difficulty in paying that. So I just wondered if there's kind of any support around paying fines, for example, when, you know, there is someone that is just cannot kind of afford to do so. But I do appreciate that that would be quite a rare instance. But I just wondered if that has been thought about in as part of your strategy here. Thank you.
I don't have the police demographic data, but I can ask the intelligence help there to help with that again. And in relation to FPNs, if people guess, we haven't issued any FPNs in respect of this PSPO, just again to make that clear. And secondly, if someone had difficulty paying, we would consider paying by instalments. But the problem with that is we have to look at then whether we would allow them a reduction in because there is a reduction in any penalty for paying early, but we would still allow that. Nothing would be done on a case-by-case basis. But we would certainly consider instalments if people had difficulty paying, and we have done that in the past for other fixed penalties.
Is that okay, Councillor Ross? Does that answer your questions? Great. Okay. I'm just looking around. So just actions that we've got is from Councillor Turbo-Doloff, it was about further mental health support for repeat offenders. From Councillor Billy Lummock, wanted to know more detail about the quality impact assessment and kind of demographic data. And also there's also a request, I think, linked to a few questions about kind of longer term outcomes. So we can explore how we want that information if it's not immediately apparent. So obviously conversation between Jerry and Rabia offline, I suggest. Okay, so this report is more for noting. There are no official recommendations, sorry. So can corporate committee members note the content of this report, the level and scope of the work being carried out to meet the requirements of the PSPO? Correct. Thank you very much. And Jerry, if you could thank your officers for the work that they do in this regard. Okay, moving on to the next substantive item, item 5, the annual performance report of the Noise Service 2022. Can I invite Jerry McCarthy to introduce this report? Again, Jerry, you've got 10 minutes to outline your key points.
Thank you, Chair. This report sets out the annual performance in relation to the noise service of period 1st of January to 31st of December 2022, provides an update on the volume of noise complaints, breakdown of individual types of noise within the service workload, including temporary event notices which continue to place significant demand on existing resources. The background of this I won't go into in any great detail, but the service commenced on the 3rd of May 2017, and it's split into 2 distinct categories. There's a team that deals with conventional noise, and obviously then we have the Uniformed Enforcement Service as well. And between them, they deal with all noise issues. But one of the things I did want to say under paragraph 4.6 on page 36 was in relation to community safety and principal enforcement officers, they're ward-based. They deal with the more difficult to resolve noise complaints, and they deal with antisocial behaviours of cases as well, and they also work out of hours. Most of the officers in the service work out of hours, just to make that quite clear. And the other thing as well is where we're not able to deal with noise as a statutory nuisance, then we can try and deal with it as antisocial behaviour using the Antisocial Behaviour and Crime Policing Act 2014, where we can issue community protection warnings, community protection notices, where we don't actually have the level of evidence that would to meet the criteria of an issue being a statutory noise nuisance. Page 37, paragraph 4.8.3, and following on from that. So May 2018, we changed how noise was reported to us, and residents now receive the same day acknowledgement. They get some guidance from us, and the next steps with managing their case. Then the other major development since then is the development of noise works, and that's in paragraph 4.8.7 on page 37, and that commenced in January 2022. That has significantly changed how noise is reported by residents, whether it's commercial or the residential, it doesn't matter. They go through the same, use the same way of doing it. And the other thing I wanted to make clear was that a privacy impact assessment was undertaken before that system was launched. And that actually is on the council's website, in case any members want to see that. Principal enforcement officers, as I said, they undertake a much wider role than that of investigating the domestic noise complaints. They deal with ASB, police liaison, deal with a range of crime and ASB prevention initiatives, and obviously deal with ASB casework as well. And again, Councillor Young has made that reference to question earlier on, people with particular vulnerabilities and multiple needs. We've done a lot of work in Manor House, so officers are quite multitask at doing stuff. So whether it's noise or ASB, they can follow a route depending on which case is operated. And we also have an out of hours noise service Thursday to Sunday. Obviously, we would like to have it 7 days a week, but obviously that would require additional resources to provide that. Obviously, one of the things with that is it's challenging as the demand can be unpredictable, because in a hot summer's night we can get significant number of complaints with 2 teams of 2 officers normally on duty. And obviously, if they have to deal with sort of, say, for example, as I said before, a rave in Hackney Marshes or something, that could take up a significant amount of resources, and then no other calls will get responded to. So there's a lot of variance, and noise, I would say, is seasonal as well. We get more noise complaints in summer than we do in winter. But having said that, we're still getting a lot of noise complaints this time of year, which I wouldn't have expected. What I did want to refer you to was paragraph 4.8.18 of page 39, with the total volumes and demands of the service. And you can see over the page in page 40, which is the reports we had from January 20 to December 2021, which were low. And then chart 2 was 2021. Then chart 3 has the noise reports for January to December 2022 by wards. And then chart 4 has them by category. One thing I did want to say with the introduction of noise works, and before anyone asks the question, is you'll notice that the number of reports has gone up significantly. So when we're reporting on this, it's not just the initial report. So the same resident can make multiple reports about an issue. They're included in these figures, just in case anyone thinks that there's more and more people affected by noise. Because one resident can make any number of reports they wish. And the other thing which is included in this data is that the housing ASP team, their noise reports are included in this information as well, because they're using the same system as us. And obviously we'll work quite closely together in relation to these cases as well. So that's the reason why the figures have gone up significantly from 2021. It was just noise reports from my own service area, whereas in 2022 it's us and housing combined, not just our own service area. And as I said, whereas before we would only make, if a person reported 10 times about an issue, we're still only being considered one report. Now each report is a report, and that's done 10 times. So, and I think it gives a much better perspective on what we're dealing with. Page 42, you can see the commercial noise reports by type, January to December. Then page 43, chart 6, the commercial noise requests. The activity 42 is breakdown by wards, and I suppose it won't surprise anyone that the highest number of commercial noise complaints on Hoxton East, Shoreditch, and Hoxton West. So that's all related to the nighttime economy of London Fields. Hackney Central also busy. If I can refer you to paragraph 4.8.21, which is in relation to work of the environmental protection officers who deal with commercial noise. So they deal with a whole variety of works. It's not just dealing with noise reports. They deal with licensing consultations, planning applications, temporary event notices. So their approach has a balance that makes sure we can respond to service requests for office attendance when they happen. 4.8.23, this is a new development. So every week we look at, the Intelligence Hub looks at weekly commercial noise analysis, so they can actually, they know how many reports have been about a particular premises in the last week. So we know whether they're from the same individual or whether from different individuals. So, and then what we did start last year was the nighttime economy tasking meeting. which the police attend as well. So, and environmental protection and enforcement and intelligence hub. So what we look at everything in overall picture of commercial noise to see what needs to be done. So as I said, interventions following on from that can be personal visits to premises, because one of the issues I find businesses say is we don't communicate well enough with them. So a personal visit to a premises will pick up that. We undertake licensing reviews, the police undertake licensing reviews. When the enforcement officers are out and about at night, they can actually undertake spot checks of premises to collate evidence. Our community safety and enforcement officers, they're out working out of hours and weekends as well to check and license premises, to check that we know there are issues with, to check if they're operating beyond their operational times, or if there are any issues with music with them. And all that information is kept so it can be provided, so we can provide the necessary information. And in Shoreditch in particular, there's a town centre meeting that we report on we attend on a regular basis, so we can actually report to the enforcement measures should the problem persist. And I followed that on paragraph 4.824 about the intelligence hub, and so that's the information. It's helped officers dealing with ongoing and new cases, and I'm not being apologise, but it's easier to provide information for Shoreditch. So we've used that as an example in the report to provide you information. And you see the chart on page 47 shows the number of commercial noise complaints for each month in that area. And it won't surprise anyone to note that 52% of reports are made between 9 p.m. and 1 in the morning, 71% are between Thursday and Friday, and 44% are between during nighttime economy hours. So that doesn't surprise us, but it gives us a lot more information. And obviously, what we can do then following on from that, if you look at the chart on page 48, it confirms that. So on page 49, I just wanted to draw your attention to the number of repeat reports from individual premises has actually declined each quarter. So the most reports the venue has received during Q3, say to the end of November, is 6. And that may be because we only did it for 2 months and not the full 3 months. But the number of one-off reports regarding individual venues is more prevalent. And it shows that repeat venues have been successfully targeted with interventions. And I followed that on page 49. So, for example, premises that received 16 reports during Q1, which is January to March, has not received further reports. Only one report after that year, which was the end of April. And that was due to the intervention on the part of the environmental protection. As a venue that had 10 reports in Q1 has only had 3 further reports in the rest of the year. And interventions included visits from the police licensing team, as well as environmental protection. And obviously, a lot of work has gone on and all of that, and that's highlighted on page 50. I don't want to dwell too much on that, but it just goes to show that we have this information which we didn't necessarily have before, and we are able to use it. We share the information with the police as well at the weekly NTE tasking meeting. And then on page 51, it just shows charts highlighting, then this is particular again to Shoreditch, which shows noise complaints from July to September, business music complaints, and then it shows the same thing again from October to the end of November as well. So there is a lot of data that we're using, and we check that out every week, and the Intelligence Hub provides that information at that meeting every week. We know which premises are causing problems, and we can address them. So in terms of environmental protection, what we did was we have to create a new role within the service, which is the first response officer. The job of that officer is to filter and triage all new reports received by the team, which they've done very successfully, and that obviously saves time that the ward officers would deal with. They can deal with the more complex cases of that. And on page 54, at the top of the page, there's a breakdown of the work undertaken by the first response officer. And that has greatly improved the work of the team, so the actual ward officers can deal with the more difficult cases that are ongoing. The first response officer deals with the cases that can be more easily resolved. Page 54, paragraph 4.9 onwards, it's to do with temporary event notices. And that is for information a lot as well on that, but obviously we get a lot of temporary event notices, and I'll come to that in a bit. And you will see the chart on the paragraph 4.9.4 on page 55 shows the environmental protection responses to temporary event notices for 2022. The only two teams that can respond to temporary event notices are environmental protection or the police. Nobody else can make a representation on temporary event notice. But obviously, if an objection is made to an application for a 10, then a lot of work has to be undertaken and it can be time consuming. And when that's set out against the volume of 10s received and the timescales imposed by the legislation, we have to work with that. And again, as I said, all temporary event notices are scrutinised at our weekly tasking meeting, which is the normal tasking meeting, not the nighttime economy tasking meeting. So any 10 in the borough that's happening, we do know about it, and they're all flagged up by the Intelligence Hub. So, and if there have been previous noise reports about an current application, that would get picked up at the tasking meeting and will be addressed at that meeting. Paragraph 4.9.7 on page 57. I know we've discussed this previously to make this meeting, and councillors have sort of asked me why do I think the amount in Hackney is disproportionately high. But you will see we received the second highest number of 10s in London after Westminster. And that's that we've, from information boroughs have provided to the Home Office. And obviously 10s are a barometer of activity, and they cause a lot of problems because it gives people extra hours in addition to traditional hours. They have lots of businesses apply for them. Say if you've only got a license at 2 a.m, then you can apply for a 10, say to open at 3 a.m. And it's £21, and there's a lot, the application fees, a lot of work for officers and licensing. It's a lot of work for our legal and governance colleagues, and it's a lot of work for councillors who sit on the licensing subcommittee, because if there is an objection about environmental protection of the police, then a subcommittee needs to be hastily arranged. And obviously that depends on the availability of councillors who are all busy people as well. So I do know that Councillor Fiona Thomas has raised this through London councils, and we hope at some point something will be done about it. But I can't, it's not a priority as far as I'm aware for the Home Office to do anything about it. But one hopes that we can just keep getting some improvements or changes made, even if the application fee was increased. Because what 10s were originally set up for was, for example, something like a church hall that didn't have a license to sell alcohol, to allow them to apply to have an event for less than 500 people where they could actually have entertainment and sell alcohol. So that is an issue. I just want to highlight some figures on construction site noise of what we do about that. And you will see for the year the number of notices served, the number of consents issued. We intend to serve to get more consents issued rather than notices. A notice just restricts the hours specifically, where the consent gives us better, it's a better power for us to do, because we can put more conditions in a consent than we would actually put in a section 60 notice. And that we feel that's the best option for us at the moment. And that is it in a nutshell. I'm sorry it's been rushed, but I'm happy to take any questions.
That's great, Jerry. Thank you very much for going through the report. Okay. So I'll start online first. Councillor Joseph.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much again, Jerry, for that very comprehensive report. So my question, kind of two little points I wanted to sneak in. So the report on noise acknowledges the impact of COVID on how noise affects people, with residents working from home and so on during the pandemic. And to a certain extent, I think that has continued. I think a lot of people are still working from home. And obviously we do still have very extremely overcrowded homes, particularly some of our social homes, all playing their part in, you know, noise being more, people being more, perhaps a little bit more sensitive to noise, and also people inadvertently causing more noise. So my first part of my question was, what requirements are there for tenants or residents to lay flooring in their flats, particularly where they've got people underneath them? I've dealt with a lot of casework where we feel that, you know, noise would have been minimised had there been something a bit more substantial just laid on the upstairs neighbour's floor. So I'm just wondering whose responsibility is that to do, and how can we sort of enforce or encourage people to do that? And the other thing I wanted to pick up on was the noise from construction, which you've obviously just mentioned there with the consents. I was just wondering about working hours, because obviously we've got an increasing number of building sites in Hackney, and some of them are very, very, very close to people's residences, which can cause a lot of stress, particularly when people feel that, you know, these building sites are operating out of hours or at the weekends. So I'm just wondering if there's any examples where we've refused people permission to start early or to do weekend work. I mean, how does it tend to work? I mean, if they put in a request, do we automatically grant it? Or do we sometimes say, actually, no, you know, the residents' peace is more important than your ability to construct at that hour? So sorry, that was a bit long, but yeah, those 2 points. Thank you very much.
In relation to your first question, we can't force anyone to improve their sound insulation. So with just effective sound insulation between flats, we can't use the statutory nuisance powers to deal with that. However, it's all about being reasonable. And I always use this example: if someone is using washing machine at 3 p.m. in the day, that's reasonable, whereas if they're using it at 3 a.m. in the morning, that's unreasonable. So I think it's all about being reasonable between neighbours, and it can cause a lot of problems, and it has caused problems, we know that. So ultimately it is up to the social landlord, whoever owns the property, to decide whether they want to invest money to improve the sound insulation or not. We can't force the resident to put down additional, say, carpets or flooring or whatever. And I wouldn't advise anyone to put down laminate flooring, because that only adds to the problem. It doesn't actually help at all. It doesn't help anyway with soundproofing, because it's too echoey and it doesn't give any protection. In relation to your second question, our normal standard operation hours of construction sites are 8 to 6 Monday to Friday, 8 to 1 Saturday, not at all Sundays or bank holidays. But if, for example, a construction site needs to undertake work, for example, it needs to use some power floating, which, say, for example, had to finish that, and finish, say, go beyond 6 o'clock sometimes. Because of power floating, once you start, you have to finish the same day. What we would do is say, yes, we will allow you to do that, but what we would ask them to do is to write to local residents and say, on Wednesday the 15th or whatever, we need to undertake this job, and the noise will go on beyond 6 p.m. Sometimes residents are reasonable, sometimes residents are not, but I can fully understand living so close to the construction site for a long period of time can be incredibly frustrating, and I know we've had some difficult situations.
It isn't an easy one to resolve, but yeah, very smashed. Oh, Josephine's raised a hand. Over to you, Josephine.
Thank you, Councillor. Just to reiterate what Jerry said, and it's also obviously if there's emergency works that require to be undertaken because they're an emergency or something's happened where you need to secure a building and it's emergency works that need to be undertaken, obviously the council does try and warn residents in advance, but there potentially are situations where you can't do that. You try and keep the disruption as minimal as possible, but if they're emergency, they have to be done.
Yeah. Does that answer your question, Councillor Joseph?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so I think we had Councillor Yable and Councillor Webb. Councillor Young? Oh.
I didn't hear the first name, I just ignored it. Wanted to ask you a bit about sort of long-term noise problems. And I know, I mean, noise issues are often really difficult and intractable to resolve, not always quick and easy. I know in the north of the borough, there are quite a number of schools right in residential areas that cause noise problems, some of them registered, some of them unregistered. Just wondered how you reflect I can't see anything in the report that sort of says whether schools are dealt with as commercial or not commercial. But I wondered if it would be possible to talk a little bit about how you seek to resolve noise coming from schools, and particularly where there's a sort of ongoing problem and which might interrelate with planning issues and other questions which aren't the responsibility of this team.
Thank you. We deal with schools as commercial. Obviously, our own Hackney schools, we can't take any action against them because council officers can't take any action against the council. So we'll deal with, I know schools you're referring to, but we'll deal with the commercial noise. What we'll do is we'll try and reason with them to begin with, and depending on what it is, if there are issues are continuing, then we will end up serving an abatement notice, and then we have done that on schools. And it's somewhat to do with, and I know, for example, the school, I think you may be aware, was to do with artificial light nuisance in the school. So we dealt with that, and we actually served a notice that got resolved. There's been problems with air conditioning units, all that type of thing, and we have dealt with them in schools. Any school, non-Hackney school, would be dealt with as a commercial business. And I don't disagree with you. Sometimes it's not easy to deal with them. We don't always get cooperation. And we work closely with planning. If there are planning contraventions, then no matter what it is, if environmental protection are dealing with a noise issue, they always check to see whether that actually, whether it's a business or a school, whatever, does it have planning permission, and they make a referral to planning enforcement as well at the same time. And I do know, and we will normally deal with it quicker because the planning process is slow. So it's much slower because they can appeal, goes to the planning inspector, and it can take a long time for something to get through a planning inspector. So that's what they are. We refer cases and we work closely with planning colleagues. And the environmental protection officers comment on planning applications as well, so if they're aware of anything, whether it's a school or a business that's been put in, that's been applied for planning permission, we would be recommending appropriate conditions to minimise any disruption to local residents.
Where you've got these long-term problems, I know residents sometimes feel they've already reported it, so why are they being asked to report it again? No, I've reported it and nothing happened, so why am I reporting it again? So I just wondered how we can improve on that communication with residents to understand that actually they do need to keep reporting. If the noise is ongoing, they need to keep reporting so that we keep recording it, because otherwise what we've got is a recorded report on X date and then nothing. So as far as our recording system is concerned, there was no further problem. Do you see what I mean? So do we have a way of understanding that there's an ongoing problem? Either the resident needs to keep reporting it every day when it happens, or they don't, because we understand that it's ongoing and it hasn't stopped.
Residents, they get noise guidance, they get that information, they need to read that information, and obviously they don't need to report it every day, but if they feel their case is there's been no progress on it, they then should report it again, and then that will go to the ward environment protection officer, depending what it is, the principal enforcement officer, and they will deal with that as an ongoing case. When you report something, it does ask you the system automatically, is this new or have you reported before? And if you reported before, you've got to put in that reference number, and then it's a new case on the same reference number.
Yep. Okay, Councillor Webb, and I noticed Councillor Ross online has got a question. So over to Councillor Webb first.
Thank you, Chair. In the residential noise reports, the second line has the category blank, and there's quite a lot of blanks. Just wonder how they are accounted for. In the same chart, it has listed halfway down as pollution, bonfire smoke, and I'm not sure how that's a noise report issue. And with the out of hours service, I know the difficulties of operating an out of hours service, but if a resident has neighbours that come back at 2 AM afterwards regularly, then starts to have a party, then what do they do in terms of being able to record? Thank you.
Yes, the other case is high, but that is if a resident's reporting online, they haven't either filled in the category or else are the out of hours officers who take the initial log the calls haven't filled it in, so it's a fault on their part. But if there's a regular problem at 2 o'clock, our officers will stay beyond that and never to witness it, and they have done. So if we notice there's an ongoing case, so we'll use Hackney Wick on a regular basis, then we can get to that late beyond 2 a.m. if it's the regular problem, not just a one-off.
The pollution thing, sorry, that was just a bit quirky.
Where is that?
Halfway down in the chart 2, it says pollution bonfire smoke. I mean, I do appreciate that's a problem, but I didn't think it was noisy.
I wondered if all smells are considered noise. I know I've been asked to report a smell to the noise team before.
Any smells can be reported if you go into www.hackney.gov/noise, and then it will ask you whether it's noise or another matter. So you can report, say, smell from a restaurant, artificial light nuisance, anything that can be reported separately.
Okay. And so Councillor Ross, and then we have a question from Councillor Finney Lubbock. Councillor Ross.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I had just two questions really, just two quick questions. My first one was around the kind of more the domestic noise. I noticed that in terms of first response visits, that the number of those seem to be quite small in comparison to the number of reports, and I just wondered why that was. Is it because there's just multiple kind of reports of noise for the same noise, or is there another reason, maybe kind of due to kind of staffing or something like that? And also my second question is just quickly around, actually it kind of links to my colleague's question point, Councillor Young's point, because I was just wondering in terms of the commercial noise, I know you've been working with venues to improve this, and there has been a reduction in reports and complaints, but I just wondered how we know if this reduction is because measures have been implemented or if it's because residents are tired of repeatedly complaining. So I just wondered if you'd be able to know the difference of when, you know, why there's been a reduction. Thank you.
Did you get that, Jerry?
Yes, thank you. Well, if you look at the reports, and to go back to page 50 on sort of the number of cases that officers dealt with, you can see officers have taken a lot of significant action, whether it's visits, letters, whatever. And I do believe that the reduction is because of action we have taken or we have taken in conjunction with the police, whether it's to review a premises license or whatever. I don't think people are actually tired of reporting because the numbers have rocketed in the last year. So I don't think there is a problem with under-reporting or people being tired of reporting. And if some people can report a matter up to 100 times, so it's not. So I don't think that actually happens. But if people are, if they're not happy, people aren't happy with the service they're getting, they can make a complaint, and where they should be getting involved with their ward member would be if they have an ongoing investigation. They're not happy with that, they can contact their ward councillor, which is one of the roles of the ward councillor, and then we will investigate that and reply back to the ward council to find out what is going on and what action we've taken.
Did that answer your question, Councillor Ross? So Jerry seemed
Yes,
to.
it did. Yes, it did. Just to just quickly say that in terms of, you know, the point around the reduction in complaining and complaints, I don't think there would be necessarily, my thought wasn't around the work you're doing. I think the work you've been doing is, you know, is great. I'm just thinking in terms of venues themselves, if they are actually making a real change on the ground, or whether you know, that they're not really, and then you know, residents are tired of complaining. But yeah, thank you for that.
So are venues making the changes as a
I think
result of the
venues are
work?
making changes because we visit venues with the police licensing team in particular, where we know there's ongoing issues on a weekly basis. We know the venues, say the previous week, which have caused problems, and we will visit them with the police if needs be, or if it's a licensing issue, that will be followed up by the licensing team. And obviously the police or the council can apply for a review of a premises license, which is a very strict measure that we wouldn't do it unless it was a final straw. But what we will always do is sort of engage with venues. One of the things we have is with the Hackney Nights portal, and we've done, since that was introduced, the engagement with businesses that we've done has gone up significantly in the last 2 years.
So that's reassuring. And yeah, it sounds like there's very good engagement. Okay, over to Councillor Vinnie Lovick.
Just a couple of quick questions. One is on 4.8.5 and 4.8.12. Just wondering how long the new system is, the sort of back end system is going to be up and running in full, and in the interim and transition, what does that mean in terms of the service? And same sort of goes for 4.8.12. What work is still needed to improve the website, and what are the timescales and impacts for that? And the other thing goes back to something you said around the having second highest number of TENS applications. I'm wondering if that's solely because of volume of activity, or because there are other barriers potentially to licensees getting regular year-round licenses that kind of cover their needs.
In relation to the licensing, I don't think that is premises having licenses is a barrier, because what a lot of TENS businesses use them for would be to extend their ongoing operational hours. And yes, we have 2 special policy areas in the borough, but I would say that most of the applications for licenses in those special policy areas applied for are actually granted, with conditions obviously. But licensee cannot apply for premises licenses in an SPA unless they can meet the 4 licensing objectives in the first place. And so, and businesses are aware that those policies exist and they need to comply with them. So I don't think that's actually an issue, but obviously TENS, it will extend their existing operational hours by whatever they applied for in 10. But again, the police in particular have been strict after COVID. They were refusing all TENS at one stage, but they will look at TENS objectively. In relation to the website, that's something to be done for the coming year, within the next 12 months. That will be looked at and reviewed. So we just want to check the information is still current and correct. And your other question was?
It was so the website, and then also the back end system. And 4.8.5, it says that the new system is still not quite in place, or there's some work to be done. Just wondering how long that will take and what the impacts are in terms of the service.
There aren't any impacts on the service as a result of that, but what we want to have is a better reporting function. But as you will see, we have been able to extract data from the system, which we have never been able to do previously. So we've got how many reports by ward type. And I know Councillor Webb referred to the other, but we will work on that to reduce that session, because this is still quite high.
Councillor Turbo-Doloff.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I just have a quick question regarding TENS. It is, I think, for me, it's not surprising to see that Hackney is second place receiving TENS, and I can appreciate the work that means to your team. I work heavily with the Latin American community in terms of events, for cultural events, and I know that they're even applying for here, and they haven't been successful in confirming a TENS. So my question is, what type of TENS are we approving in terms of categories, in, say, cultural events, social, community? Is it possible to have at some point a breakdown of what is approved? The number is very high, it's very clear, but it would be good to know from those that are applied, how many, maybe I missed it because maybe I haven't read that in full, But I'm just wondering in terms of categories, what are we approving? Thank you.
I think it would be very difficult to give you a further breakdown because they're all associated with premises. So we would know how many, say, are pubs, nightclubs, church holes, whatever, but apart from to get a breakdown beyond that would be really difficult.
I think it'd be quite helpful to have that breakdown if that was possible.
Thank you. I mean, that makes sense what you say, but in their application, they will say what it is for, wouldn't they? So maybe that will be.
It would be for a premises. But I'm saying we have types of premises, i.e. a nightclub, a pub, a bar, a restaurant, whatever. So we can say how many tents for each of those, but it won't say how many were specifically for cultural events. We wouldn't have all that information. Because it could be in a church hall, it could be in a mosque, whatever happens, could be whatever activities going on in that particular cultural activity.
Yeah, I mean, I can see Councillor Des. I just wondered whether we could have that breakdown in terms of the type of premises. I think that might be useful. But Councillor Desmond, have you got a question that adds to this point?
It's just on the general issue of noise nuisance.
Okay, should we just finish with the tents?
Yeah.
first? Councillor Tebbe, did you want to try and inquire any further, or?
Thank you. I appreciate what you said. I think it totally makes sense. I'm just thinking in terms of wider strategies at council as well, understanding what happens in community spaces across the borough. Because I guess my concern is, and in experience of working management of premises, that events can go all the way towards, say, one type of activity, because as well produces income and so on, but then the cultural side, all the community events are not then run out of spaces or licensing to use halls and so on. Be good, I think, especially for the focus of community engagement across the borough. Thank you.
Can I just say a community event is unlikely to be refused to 10? Because number one, it wouldn't be going on late. Secondly, it would be in a hall or community space, which you mentioned, and our environmental protection team would be unlikely to raise an objection unless there'd been problems previously at the same venue. So that's one of the things we look at. If there's been an application for 10 at the same venue and there were problems with it, then they're likely to make an objection. And likewise with the police, there was some issue associated with dispersal from the event or antisocial behaviour caused as a result of the event. So to answer your question, I would say community events are highly unlikely not to be given a 10.
Yeah, does that answer? I mean, I think an action could be a breakdown of 10s as much as you possibly can. It's reasonable.
It's a lot of work, that's all I'll say.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just add that we're kind of very great. We had quite a long discussion about 10s. Really pleased that you went into all the detail. You did a report last year, and we heard this report as well. And Councillor Joanna Thomas was already talking about it with Jerry, but has taken it up at a higher level, as Jerry mentioned, because it obviously is a concern about the number of 10s that we have and the fact that many happen in a way that wasn't originally intended by the actual, legislation. So yeah, so it's something that we as a corporate committee will keep on monitoring. Maybe we can have a follow-up to Councillor Joanna Thomas as an action as well.
Can I ask a follow-up on the 10s?
On the 10s, yeah.
I just want to, it was really interesting to see our figures compared to other boroughs. I was just wondering whether we talk to other boroughs about, whether they just don't use 10s for the sorts of things that we do allow 10s for, or is it that we have more events in Hackney, or is it that we're using our 10s in a different way?
It's not a case of allowing or not allowing a 10. Anyone can apply for a 10 for any business. You could apply for a 10 for a bar in Hackney you don't even own. So it's as simple as that. So it's not a case of simply allowing or not allowing. What we look at, that the other councillor is, if there's been a previous issue with a 10 at that address, then our environmental protection team is likely to make an objection, as is the police. Otherwise, the 10 would be allowed.
Yeah, I suppose what my question is do we know whether they are used in a different way in Hackney and other boroughs?
I think every borough has a problem with Thames. There are businesses use them the same way, more or less, everywhere.
I think another useful thing to add to the data breakdown, if it's possible, would also be geography, so we can see where they're being applied. Okay, is that it? I think we've asked all the questions on Thames. Councillor Desmond. The last
Yeah, so
question.
on this, Jerry knows that noise nuisance is one of the perennial problems that we as councillors are asked to deal with. And when there are children running around in flats, you're not to tell the children to be on leashes, and we have to tell people live and let live. And I'm doing a citizenship ceremony tomorrow, and that's one of the philosophical things I'll say about Hackney. We have a belief in live and let live. But to be honest, when you're suffering perennial noise nuisance, it is extremely distressing. What I find is that when dealing with you, and particularly Dawn Henry in my ward, she does a very good job and is very good at mediating. But when it comes to particularly street properties that are owned by the council or where we're the freeholder, it's generally the housing department that has to deal with it. And to be honest, I'd rather Dawn or your colleagues could perhaps participate, because in some of these cases, it really requires a joint effort between the people upstairs. It's often sound insulation or the type of flooring. I'm not ever going to say that children should be constrained, because kids are kids. But sometimes, especially with the Victorian properties, the sound insulation is so appalling that it is very, very distressing for people, that if there is loud music or anything like that, it creates deep disturbance. Is there any way that we can get Dawn or you or any of your colleagues to work closer with housing to try and deal with these very intractable problems?
We are working much closer with the Housing ASB team, but what I would say was, I think if there's an issue that you're aware of that you think requires our input, then you could make that request to the housing officer dealing with the case and ask for input, see how we can help them. And as you mentioned something that was very interesting, in dealing with all these cases, all our officers are always mediating between residents. It's not just as if we're dealing with stuff that's black and white. We try and be reasonable about it. Because everything, no matter what you're doing, whether it's noise nuisance or anything in life, it's all about reasonableness. And that's what we try and encourage people to be reasonable. And yes, there are intractable situations, we know that. And that's what we try and do. But we'll be quite happy to take on to assist.
Okay.
Chair, can I come in for the something related?
Yes, of course. We will allow you to have the last question. You're very
Yeah,
welcome.
It was in the chat box actually. I sent messages earlier. I don't have the facilities on my iPad to raise my hand actually. For the noise issues, Jerry, how do we deal with the noises comes from the wooden floor or wooden floor from the above flats? And then as far as I raised this years ago, as far as I know, the above floor flats are not allowed to have wooden or illuminated floor. So that creates too much noise. How do we deal with that? And then what is the regulation on it? Secondly, the what do you call it? The walk-in showers, the adaptive showers. They create too much noise because of the water pipe. And then so what I was dealing one of the few cases before, and then I asked the engineers, why is this causing that water pipe noise for the adaptive shower? They said because of the costing. I mean, if they need to do more work to stop that noises, do you get that kind of complaint? I mean, do you get complaint from the adaptive showers used? Because it creates too much noise after people using their adaptive shower because they don't fix the water pipe, water pump with the adaptive shower. So can I get some information on that, please?
Yeah, so thanks, Councillor Osmond. I think in terms of the wooden floors, Jerry's covered that, but if he could quickly kind of summarise what he said, and the showers I don't think has cropped up, so how would you address?
In relation
issue
to
of
enforcement
showers.
of wooden floors, that would be if people have put laminate floors down, it'd be breach of tenancy agreement, which would be dealt with by the landlord,
Yeah.
whether it's an RSL or whether it's Hackney Housing, whoever. In terms of showers, that's usually caused by water pressure problem, and again, it requires an engineering solution. And we have dealt with issues about that and resolved them. We've managed to get the water pressure increased, or they've done some change things around. So that's, or another thing is people have their showers at a different time of the day, which helps as well, because then you're not disturbing. It's being reasonable. You're disturbing someone at 5 a.m. and disturbing someone at 8 a.m. There's a total difference.
Did you get that, Councillor Osmond? I hope you find that helpful. So it can be a breach of tenancy issue if people have put down a laminate floor, so that can be followed up.
Yeah,
And
is it-
also,
is
Jerry's
it-
team have also dealt with the showers issues.
Yes.
And
Is wooden floor same things for the housing associations?
sorry, can you repeat
Yeah.
that?
Is it same for the housing associations tenants? Not only
Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes, it will be. So you can
Okay.
raise that directly with member services, and I'm sure they can follow that through for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you
thank
for the
thank you.
question. Sorry. Great, thanks. Okay, thanks, Jan. Sorry, thanks, Councillor Osmond. Okay.
You're welcome, no problem.
I think we've covered all of the points. Again, there aren't any official recommendations. So could I ask members to note the annual performance report?
Okay.
Thank you. Jerry, you're welcome to leave, or if you want to stay and discuss our work programme, your input, I'm sure it's entirely up to you. Thank you for your time. Okay, moving on to the item 6, the draft work programme. So if you can turn your attention to pages 661 onwards. So we're just currently deciding the date of the May-June meeting. It's the one we agreed in May, it's 24th. We decided it's a bit too soon for the papers that we want to come, so we're trying to agree a date in early June. We do have to meet before the planning committee though, so we need to get that sorted out quite soon. Is it, should we say we've penciled in the 7th of June, and that might involve a move of the planning committee meeting, is that correct? To the 8th of June. Okay, so in that May-June meeting, one thing I noticed we missed the keeping the pavements clear item, which I think was...
Isn't that for the jury? Isn't that coming together?
I thought that was June, wasn't it? So just so you know, we have an annual look. So council started under Councillor Webb's leadership, and input from some former councillors. We've had an item, a standing item, where we look at how the council, different departments work together to keep the council's pavements clear. So that's street scene, that's markets with kind of tables and chairs, items on pavements, obviously bikes, and also Jerry's and team in terms of enforcement. So we're going to have that item for this meeting, but it's been delayed. But we have an annual report when those three teams come together. And the reason for that is often we would get, you know, different departments to say, this is not dealt with by us, it's dealt with by them. So it's an attempt to bring all of that together. So we need to add that. Another item which I was going to bring under AOB, but is implicated with this agenda, is that Councillor Young and I had a meeting with Mark Carroll, CEO, and Councillor Nicholson today. So the council is undergoing a 2-year period where they're looking at the changes that we need to make sure we implement our strategic plan effectively. So we're exploring the role that the corporate committee can play in this. So we need to have a little bit look at government's arrangements and and scope it out a little bit more. So I can't tell you exactly what it's going to look like. But I just wanted to ask members whether that's something you would like Councillor and myself to still carry on exploring. And if so, we'd like that to come to June Corporate Committee as a substantive item. If it means that June's too busy, we can look at moving things around a little bit. But we believe that it's quite a significant report that we'd like to hear. So just, if I've got your approval, we will carry on with that. Okay, so that's possible for June as well, but we can discuss if we want to move things around. Okay, any other comments on the work programme? Councillor Binny Lubbock.
Just two quick ones. As you were talking about the environmental protection enforcement and the different people who come to speak to that around keeping our pavements clear, I wonder if there's anything from the sort of comms department around the digital ad sites that they plan to install and how they're planning to mitigate the impacts of those. And then the other thing was for December, you've got the Gender Inequalities Pay Gap report, and I'm wondering if we're also able to include anything around LGBTQI plus pay gap. I think we've discussed that previously at full council. The item says equalities pay gap, so I'm wondering if there's scope within that.
In terms of the boards, the ad boards, we can get back to. I can certainly have a look at that. Would that fall under your, in any shape or form? Might be street scene. The street scene, I would have thought.
Could be street scene or yeah.
Yes.
The communications department, I think, will be
Possibly comms. I mean, I'll speak about that, but I imagine it's more street scene, and that could come under that remit, Councillor Binny Lubbock. And in terms of the Gender Inequalities Pay Gap report, yes, we can certainly follow that up and ask that question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other comments on the work programme? Okay, so we can agree the draft work programme for 23-24. Great. Any other business? Item 9. I've got one. Okay, so I attended the CJC the other day, which is a meeting that happens, I think, once a quarter, and the chair, such as myself as corporate, attends. We also have another councillor, Councillor Lufkin. It's chaired by Councillor Williams, and we have staff union reps, and also, you know, HR, head of finance, etc., attends as well. And what we've been looking at the change the ways of working, and what we'd like to do is to have a visit around the Hackney Service Centre to see how this is working in practice. So I thought I'd propose that this could happen as part of a corporate committee visit. So people approve of that, we shall go ahead with that. Yeah. Okay, great. Any other business? Anybody? Okay, I think I can declare this meeting closed. Thank you for your attendance to those here.